Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Horror Trans. My name is Stephanie Bree. I am a transgender woman, and I talk about all things horror. And this is horror icon Freddy Krueger. Um, if you've been following this series at all, you know that I tried to go into detail a little bit or analyze the icons that I cover. However, I have another channel, Stephanie Bree, BRI, over on YouTube, where I did a deep dive into the Nightmare on Elm Street lore, and in doing so, I covered a lot of Freddy Krueger in that video, and I have already reviewed the entire A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, so this video is going to be shorter than most horror icon videos because, one, I'd rather you go watch those other videos because I've already done them and I've already talked about this stuff. Two, I don't want to end up repeating myself over and over again. And three, Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite horror movie of all time. Freddy Krueger is my favorite villain, but he's been talked to and talked about to death. There's really nothing new I can say about him that hasn't already been said. And while I hope my videos are informative and entertaining, I'm not stupid, and I know you watch other channels, and I know you probably already know who Freddy Krueger is. So I feel like this may be wasting your time because I don't really feel like I'm going to say anything new that I haven't already said in a previous video. So I'm going to give you the rundown like I did with Jason and Michael Myers. Freddy Krueger, to me, is the most interesting horror villain of all slasher villains, and I'm saying slasher villains, because I'm not going to say he's the most interesting of all the horror villains in all of horror, but of all the slasher villains, he is the most interesting. Now, there is the somewhat problematic timeline in that there are at least three or four different manifestations of Freddy Krueger. And this is because the creature in New Nightmare is not Freddy Krueger, but it looks like Freddy Krueger. It walks and talks like Freddy Krueger. It kills like Freddy Krueger. So we'll call it Freddy Krueger, even though it isn't. So we'll say there's at least three different interpretations of Freddy Krueger. We're talking films. We're not even talking about Freddy's Nightmares. That's a whole nother video for a whole nother day. Here's the gist of it. His mom was a nun. She got locked in a room over the weekend with 100 different criminally insane people, men, who rape her repeatedly, hundreds of times. She ends up getting pregnant. She gives birth to a bastard child who has no legitimate father to speak of. And he's more or less raised as an orphan, more or less. He gets married, gets a job, has a kid, and then becomes a serial killer and starts murdering children. He, depending on the timeline and depending on how far you read between the lines, may or may not also be a child molester. This is hinted at in the New Line Cinema films, the original timeline. It's spelled out plain as day, black and white, explicitly in the Platinum Dunes remake. So that's a different interpretation of Freddy Krueger. But in the original timeline, he murdered kids. 20 to 30 thereabouts, I believe was the quote. And then he had a trial. There was a mistrial of sorts. And the parents of the murdered kids got together, locked him in a warehouse or chased him to a warehouse or his boiler room or whatever. I don't know what a boiler room is. And they burned him to death. And then sometime later, he comes back as a dream demon in the nightmares of the kids of the same parents that killed him. And then he kills them in their dreams. And if you die in the dream, you die for real. So he's a supernatural character as well. Now, I do go deep into this in my Nightmare on Elm Street lore video, so do check that out. But I'm just going to give a surface layer of it. You have parents. Fuck is that sound? Oh, it's the heater blowing trash bags. You have parents who had kids who were murdered, who formed a mob and murdered Krueger, and then presumably had more kids and didn't tell those kids about their murdered siblings, which is pretty fucked up. I go way deeper into this into my lore video, so go check that out. I'll try to put a link to it if I remember to, but don't hold me to that, please. I'm bipolar. I have scatterbrain. Bipolar is a cousin of ADHD, so think ADHD on steroids. Yeah. Anyways, I've already talked about that too on my other channel. But anyways, yeah, you have these kids of the parents of the kids he murdered, he's now killing. So he's killing their younger, but now older, which is confusing, brothers and sisters. Somewhere along the lines, he does his work. He finishes the job. You know, job well done. He gets them all. He Pokemon collects them all. And decides he's still hungry because he feeds on their souls and their fear. And decides he's not ready to go back to hell. He wants to, you know, collect more souls. So he devises a plan to use one of his victims' powers that gets transferred into a new teenager, who he then uses her dreams to lure in other kids that aren't on his hit list, so he can keep killing. And if you follow the timeline, he ends up doing job well done again and kills all the rest of the kids in town, so there's no kids left. None. Zero. He kills the last one, and then he's like, well, shit. I'm too goddamn good at my job. I need more fucking kids. And so he summons his daughter, who is a, I'll say caseworker for the county shelter, teen shelter or something along those lines, and uses her to lure new teenagers into town so he can kill them, which he does, and then realizes yet again he's too good at his job, and then his daughter figures him out, pulls him into the real world. Nancy Thompson kills him, and we get the end. That's the end of the Nightmare on Elm Street timeline. Now, and there's a split in the timeline. A split happens where either the town adults come together and form a conspiracy to cover up Freddy and somehow repopulate the town. And then we get to Freddy versus Jason. I call bullshit on that. So in my view, in the Freddy versus Jason timeline, Freddy's dead either never happened, so we have to backtrack to Dreamchild, or Freddy's dead takes place after Freddy versus Jason, which doesn't work either, because we see clips of Freddy versus Jason, Freddy's dead in Freddy's versus Jason. So it's convoluted, which is fucking bullshit, and it pisses me off that they had to make it so goddamn convoluted. So, my personal take is that Freddy versus we're going to ignore the flashbacks in Freddy versus Jason referencing Freddy's dead, and we're going to assume he has premonitions of the future, and that, because why not? I'm going to give him that, and we're going to assume Freddy's dead takes place after Freddy versus Jason. And that's where I'm at, because if you watch the movies sequentially, 1 through 5, and then Freddy vs. Jason, you get a relatively coherent story and a pretty tidy timeline. By the time we get to Dreamchild, it makes sense that the parents would have gotten on to Freddy and would have said, you know what? All of our fucking teenagers are killing themselves. There's gotta be more to it than that. They're all telling us about this supernatural force and their dreams and everything. Maybe we should take them seriously and just eliminate the problem and drug them up with Hypnosil and erase all references to Freddy and see if that does it. And presumably it does. And then Freddy gets pissed off and summons Jason from hell and turns him loose on Elm Street so that he'll wreak havoc, so the kids will fear him, so he can come back. And then he finishes the job, and then we get Freddy. Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare. Let's sidestep all of that and actually talk about New Nightmare, because I just said fuck this movie on top of my lungs for 30 seconds when I reviewed New Nightmare, which is not fair to y'all. So I'll probably do a revisited of that film in the future. Because I feel like you deserve that, and I should have done better. So, my bad. But I really hate this movie. I really fucking hate Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So let's talk about it anyways. I'm actually going to get into the lore. So, in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies never happened. They're just fucking movies that we all watched. We all rented from the video store. Watched on fucking Cinemax or whatever. Probably not TBS. I think they're too graphic for TBS, but I do remember watching some of them on USA, so whatever. It is what it is. But we'll say they're movies. And in the Wes Craven's New Nightmare timeline, there is an evil entity, which is like Halloween, Curse of Michael Myers, Jason Goes to Hell. We're in the 90s now, so there has to be an evil entity that is complacent as long as new Freddy Krueger movies are being made, because he likes the Freddy Krueger character. And as long as they're making Freddy Krueger movies, he's happy and content, and he's just like, you know what? I'm happy. I'm good. But then they stop making Freddy movies, and he gets pissed off and says, you know what? Fuck you guys. Make more Freddy Krueger movies. And since they won't, he comes out of wherever this entity comes from. Hell or another dimension or whatever. Which is why I don't like this fucking movie. And starts killing people in the real world. The number one reason I hate this movie is because it shits all over the established lore. It just tosses it aside and says, those were just movies. This is for y'all. I understand artistically why Wes Craven went that direction, because he did not like what New Line did with the character after he walked away, and they kinda stabbed him in the back with part 3, and he was probably like so pissed off that he was like, you know what, I'm either gonna kill the fucking franchise or I'm not gonna fucking do it at all. And he killed the fucking franchise, more or less, which is another reason why I hate that fucking movie. But anyways, now, okay, and I will revisit New Nightmare. It's a good movie in the fact that it's well written, well produced, good story, good acting, makes a lot of sense in the context of that movie. I just personally hate it because I'm deeply invested in the Nightmare on Elm Street lore, and this movie pisses on that. And therefore it pisses on me, and that pisses me off. Because I don't like to get pissed on. And so, where I stand, yes, New Nightmare is a legit good movie. I just personally hate it so fucking much. But, somehow, Nancy Thompson, Heather Langenkamp, playing Nancy, defeats the evil entity, air quotes, and life goes on. She saves the day, life goes on. Now let's briefly talk about the remake, because I've already done a video on the remake. This version of Freddy Krueger is not a child murderer. He's a pervert who touches little kids. This version of Freddy Krueger is a bastard. The very definition of a bastard. And not a very good character. He has more in common with the evil entity than he does the New Line Cinema Freddy. But he's just too stale for me. He's not very interesting. He's really not. He's not that interesting. So, final thoughts, because I want to wrap this up, because I don't want to tread waters I've already tread. One of the reasons why I say Freddy Krueger is the most interesting horror villain in the slasher genre is he has a fully fleshed out backstory. He has a fully developed motivation. He has a fully developed and fully realized personality. Unlike most slasher villains. Most slasher villains are just pure evil incarnate. Fuck off. I shouldn't say fuck off, but just, give me more than that, please. So Freddy has, of all of them, he's the most interesting because he has a backstory, he has lore, he has a personality, he talks, which most of them don't. He's creative, he's, got a sense of humor, he's got a believable motivation, he's really cool for a bad guy. There's a reason why he's considered one of the most iconic horror villains of all time. If not the most iconic, I don't know. Jigsaw may be more iconic by today's standards, maybe even Ghostface, I don't know. But he's in the top 10. Absolutely in the top 10. Hell, he's probably in the top 5. And I don't mean my top 5, I mean society's top 5. He's probably up there. As a recognizable horror icon. Yes, I am biased. And Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite movie. Freddy Krueger is my favorite horror villain. I love the NES and Nightmare on Elm Street game. I fucking do. I fucking love it. I think it's a good game. I think it gets a bad rep by people who don't understand it. Or douchebags who listen to James Rolfe, who I don't fucking listen to. So please don't listen to James Rolfe. Other than that, the last thing I'm going to say about Freddy Krueger is he looks fucking cool. He really does. He fucking looks cool. And his appearance evolves from film to film. So he's not wearing a hockey mask or a fucking William Shatner mask or whatever. What you see is what you get. And that's fucking cool.